"Doctor, could you pretend to be my dad just for today?" asked the sick orphan girl to the doctor. Dr. Michael Anderson was walking through the halls of the Children's Memorial Hospital of Chicago when he heard a whisper that made his heart ache. It was Christmas Eve, and he had decided to make his final rounds before heading home to face another dinner alone. "Dr. Michael?" called a faint little voice from room 312. He stopped at the door and saw Emily, an 8-year-old girl who had been hospitalized for 3 months while being treated for a rare autoimmune disease. Her hair had fallen out from the treatment, but her brown eyes still sparkled with a hope the doctor couldn't understand where it came from. "Hi, Em, how are you feeling today?" he asked, stepping into the room and checking the equipment. The girl hesitated for a moment, playing with the edges of the pink hospital sheet a nurse had brought to brighten up the room. "Doctor, do you have any kids?" she asked, looking out the window where she could see Christmas lights twinkling on the buildings outside. Michael felt a tightness in his chest. He had been married to Jennifer for 10 years, and they had tried for a child for so long. When they finally succeeded, she lost the baby in the 6th month. The marriage couldn't withstand the grief, and they separated 5 years ago. Since then, he had thrown himself entirely into work, avoiding thoughts of what might have been. "No, Em, why do you ask?" he replied, sitting in the chair beside her bed. "It's just... today's my birthday," she said with a shy smile. "I turned 8. Nurse Margaret brought me a little cake, but..." She stopped speaking, and Michael noticed tears forming in her eyes. "But what, sweetheart?" "But I really wanted to have a dad here with me, just for today. I know it's silly, but all the kids on TV get birthday parties with their mum and dad, and I've never had that." Michael felt as if someone had squeezed his heart with a vice. He knew Emily had been an orphan since she was 3, when her parents died in a car accident. Since then, she'd been through 3 different foster families, but always ended up back at the orphanage for one reason or another. When she got sick, she was brought to the hospital, and since then, no one had shown interest in caring for a sick child. "Doctor," she whispered, holding his hand with her small, cold fingers, "could you pretend to be my dad? Just for today? It's my birthday, and I asked Santa Claus for this as my gift." The doctor was speechless. In 15 years of practice, he'd dealt with difficult cases, but nothing had ever touched his heart so deeply. He looked at this brave little girl who, even sick and alone, could still smile and hold on to hope. "Em, he began, but was interrupted when Nurse Margaret walked in. "Dr. Michael, Emily has a visitor," she said with a warm smile. "A social worker from the Department of Social Services is here for an evaluation." Michael saw Emily's face light up in a way he'd never seen before. "Is it about adoption?" the girl asked, trying to sit up in bed. "Yes, sweetheart. Mrs. Patricia wants to talk to you about some families who might be interested," Margaret explained. When the nurse left, Emily grabbed Michael's arm tightly. "Please, doctor, I know Mrs. Patricia will ask me how I feel, and I want to tell her about my dad. If you pretend to be my father just for today, maybe she'll see that I know what having a family is like, and that I deserve a real one." Michael looked into those pleading eyes and knew he couldn't deny this child anything. It was such a simple, innocent request, a few hours pretending to be a father on a sick little girl's birthday. What could go wrong? "All right," he said, gently running his hand over Emily's bald head. "But just for today, and only while the social worker is here. Deal?" The smile that spread across the girl's face was so radiant that Michael felt he had made the right decision, even without imagining the consequences that would follow. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing. 20 minutes later, when Patricia Wilson, the social worker, entered the room, she was met with a surprising scene. Michael was sitting on the bed beside Emily, and the two were laughing as he told funny stories from the hospital. To anyone walking in at that moment, they truly looked like father and daughter. "Good afternoon," said Patricia, a 45-year-old woman with graying hair pulled into a tight bun. "I'm Patricia Wilson, a social worker. I've come to speak with Emily about the adoption process." "Hi, Ms. Wilson," Emily exclaimed with genuine enthusiasm. "This is my dad, Dr. Michael. He came to visit me on my birthday." Michael felt his blood run cold. They had agreed he would pretend to be her father, but he hadn't thought through the details of how it would actually work. Patricia looked at him curiously. "Nice to meet you, Dr. Michael. I wasn't aware Emily had contact with her biological father. According to the records I have, she's been an orphan since she was 3. Michael began, but Emily quickly interrupted. "My dad works a lot, so he can't visit me often. But today, on my birthday, he managed to come," she said, squeezing his hand tightly as if trying to convey confidence. Patricia jotted a few notes in her folder and sat in the chair across from the bed. "I see. Dr. Michael, may I ask what your specialty is here at the hospital?" "I'm a pediatric oncologist," he replied, trying to stay calm. "I treat children with cancer and autoimmune diseases. And you've been overseeing Emily's treatment." Michael realized he had gotten himself into a much more complicated situation than he'd imagined. How could he explain that he was caring for his own daughter without raising ethical concerns? "Well, I supervise some aspects of her treatment, but the primary team is led by Dr. Richard Thompson," he said, trying to be as honest as possible. Emily sensed the tension and decided to step in again. "Ms. Wilson, my dad is the best doctor in the world. He always explains everything about my illness and makes me less scared. The other kids at the hospital really like him too." Patricia watched their interaction closely. There was something in the way they looked at each other, in the sincerity of their affection, that deeply moved her. In her 15 years as a social worker, she had seen many cases of abandonment and neglect, but rarely had she witnessed such a genuine connection. "Emily, can you tell me how you feel about the possibility of adoption?" Patricia asked, shifting the focus of the conversation. "I really want to have a family," the girl replied, looking at Michael fondly. "I want a dad who tells me stories before bed, helps me with homework when I go back to school, and takes care of me when I'm sick, like my dad does here at the hospital." Michael felt a lump in his throat. The way Emily spoke, with so much hope and tenderness, was stirring feelings in him that he had buried years ago. He caught himself imagining what it would be like to have a daughter like her, someone to care for and love unconditionally. "And you, Dr. Michael, how do you feel about Emily's adoption process?" Patricia asked, catching him off guard. Michael was speechless. How could he answer a question about giving up his own daughter for adoption, but at the same time, he knew this charade couldn't last forever. "I just want what's best for her," he said, choosing his words carefully. "Emily deserves a family that can give her all the love and care she needs." "Daddy, will you miss me when I go to my new family?" Emily asked with devastating innocence. The question hit Michael like a punch to the gut. He looked at that brave little girl and realized that yes, he would miss her. In just a few hours of pretending to be her father, he had grown more attached than he ever thought possible. "Of course I will, my dear," he replied, and for the first time that afternoon, his words were completely sincere. Patricia watched the scene with growing unease. Something didn't add up. She had reviewed all of Emily's documents before the visit and was certain the girl was an orphan. Besides, if Michael was really her father, why was she in the adoption process? "Dr. Anderson, may I speak with you privately for a few minutes?" she asked, rising from her chair. Michael felt panic grip his body but tried to keep his composure. "Of course," he said, kissing Emily's forehead. "Daddy will be right back, okay?" In the hallway, Patricia closed the door to the room and faced Michael seriously. "Doctor, I need to be direct with you. I've reviewed all of Emily's records and there's no mention of a living father. In fact, the documents clearly state that both parents died in a car accident when she was 3. Can you explain this discrepancy?" Michael felt the ground vanish beneath his feet. He had promised Emily he would help her, but now he realized his lie might cause more harm than good. "Patricia, I can explain," he began, taking a deep breath. "But first you need to understand I only did this to make a sick child happy on her birthday." He told her the whole truth, how Emily had asked him to pretend to be her father, how he had agreed just to make her happy, and how the situation had gotten complicated when the social worker arrived earlier than expected. Patricia listened in silence, arms crossed, her expression growing more serious by the minute. "Dr. Anderson, do you have any idea how serious this is?" Pretending to be the father of a child in the adoption process could be considered fraud. Not to mention, as a doctor at this hospital, you have a professional code of ethics to uphold. I know, and I deeply regret getting into this situation, Michael said, running his hands over his face. But when I saw that little girl asking just to have a father on her birthday, I couldn't say no. She's lost so much in life, and I only wanted to give her a moment of happiness. Patricia sighed deeply. After years of working with vulnerable children, she had developed an instinct for recognizing when someone genuinely cared for a child's well-being and when their motives were questionable. Michael clearly fell into the first category. "Doctor, I should report this immediately," she said, though her voice had lost some of its initial sternness. "But I can see your intentions were good, and the connection between you two is real. The question is, what do we do now?" Before Michael could answer, the door to the room swung open abruptly, and Dr. Richard Thompson, the hospital director, appeared in the hallway with a furious expression. "Dr. Anderson, I need to speak with you immediately," he said, in a tone that brooked no argument. Michael's stomach dropped. "Doctor." Richard was known for his extreme rigidity and zero tolerance for any behavior that could compromise the hospital's reputation. "Dr. Richard, I can explain," Michael began but was cut off. "In my office. Now," said the director, turning his back and walking down the hall. Michael looked at Patricia in despair. "Please take care of Emily. She shouldn't suffer because of my mistake," he pleaded before following the director. Patricia stood frozen in the hallway for a moment, processing everything she had just discovered. When she returned to the room, she found Emily with tears in her eyes. "Miss Patricia, is my daddy going to be okay?" the girl asked, her voice trembling. Patricia sat beside the bed and held the child's hand. "Emily, I need to talk to you about something important. You knew Dr. Michael isn't really your father, didn't you?" The girl lowered her head, nodding timidly. "Can you tell me why you asked him to pretend to be your dad?" "Because," Emily began, tears streaming down her face. "Because when I'm with him, I feel like I have a real daddy. He's kind to me, explains things, and is always here when I'm scared. I thought if you saw how nice it is to have a father, maybe you'd understand why I want a family so much." Patricia felt her heart tighten. In 15 years on the job, she had seen a lot, but the purity of Emily's longing for a family touched her deeply. "And how did you meet Dr. Michael?" she asked. "He's taken care of me since I got here. At first, I was really scared of doctors, but he was always gentle. When I had nightmares, he'd come talk to me. When treatment made me sick, he stayed by my side until I felt better." Meanwhile, in the director's office, Michael faced the storm. "Dr. Anderson, I've received a security report showing you engaging in inappropriate behavior with a minor patient," Dr. Richard said, tossing photos onto the desk. "Explain what's going on." Michael looked at the photos, which captured moments of his act with Emily, him hugging her, kissing her forehead, holding her hand. To anyone unaware of the context, it could indeed seem inappropriate. "Dr. Richard, the situation isn't what it appears," Michael said, recounting the whole story again, from Emily's initial request to the social worker's arrival. The director listened silently, fingers steepled on the desk, his expression growing darker. "Dr. Anderson, in my 30 years running this hospital, I've never encountered such a serious breach. You violated basic doctor-patient protocols, deceived a government representative, and exposed the hospital to a scandal that could permanently damage our reputation." "I understand the gravity," Michael replied, keeping his voice steady despite his desperation. "But I don't regret trying to give a moment of happiness to a child who suffered so much." "Noble intentions don't justify misconduct," Dr. Richard countered. "You're suspended, effective immediately. Tomorrow, the ethics board will decide whether you continue working here." Michael felt as if he'd been punched in the gut. His medical career was all he had left after his divorce, his passion, his identity, his reason for living. "Dr. Richard, I'll accept any punishment, but please don't let this affect Emily's treatment. She needs specialized care and—" "The patient will be transferred to Dr. William Taylor's team," the director interrupted. "You're forbidden from contacting her during the investigation." When Michael left the director's office, he felt like a defeated man. He had lost his job, possibly his career, and worst of all, he could no longer care for Emily when she needed him most. As he passed room 312, he saw through the slightly open door that Patricia was still talking to the girl. He wanted to go in, explain what had happened, say a proper goodbye, but he knew it would only make things worse. Instead, he stopped at the door and whispered softly, "I'm sorry, Em." That night, in his empty apartment, Michael couldn't sleep. He lay staring at the ceiling, thinking about how an innocent lie had turned into a nightmare that could destroy his life. But more than his career, he worried about Emily. How would she react when she found out he could no longer take care of her? At the hospital, Emily couldn't sleep either. Nurse Margaret had explained that Dr. Michael wouldn't be able to visit her anymore, but she hadn't given many details. The girl sensed something terrible had happened, and somehow it was her fault. "Nurse Margaret," she called when the woman came to check her medication at 2 in the morning. "Yes, my dear? Dr. Michael is in trouble because of me, isn't he?" Margaret, a 60-year-old woman who had raised 5 children and worked at the hospital for 20 years, sighed deeply. She had witnessed the whole situation and knew Michael had acted out of genuine love for the child. "Sometimes, my dear, when we do things out of love, the consequences can be hard. But that doesn't mean we did the wrong thing." "I ruined everything, didn't I?" said Emily, tears in her eyes. "I just wanted to have a dad at my birthday." Margaret sat on the bed and hugged the girl. "You didn't ruin anything, sweetheart. You're a brave little girl who deserves all the love in the world. Dr. Michael did what he did because he truly cares about you. That's something very special." The next morning, Patricia returned to the hospital to continue Emily's evaluation. She had spent the whole night thinking about the situation and had come to some important conclusions. First, she went to Dr. Richard's office. "Dr. Richard, I came to talk about Dr. Michael and Emily's situation," she said, walking in without ceremony. "Ms. Patricia, I assure you the hospital is taking all necessary steps to ensure something like this doesn't happen again," replied the director formally. "Actually, doctor, I came to say I don't intend to file any complaint against Dr. Michael." "Doctor," Richard raised his eyebrows, surprised. "How so?" "In my 15 years as a social worker, I've learned to recognize when someone acts out of genuine love for a child and when someone has questionable intentions. Dr. Michael clearly falls into the first category. He made a mistake in judgment, but his intentions were pure. Even so, protocols were violated. Protocols exist to protect children," Patricia interrupted. "But sometimes the best protection a child can have is someone who genuinely cares about them." Emily told me about all the special care Dr. Michael gave her these past months. He went beyond his medical duties to ensure her emotional well-being. Dr. Richard was silent for a moment, processing the social worker's words. "Besides," Patricia continued, "I'd like to propose something unusual, but it might be the solution to all the problems involved. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out." Now continuing. 2 hours later, Michael received an unexpected call from Patricia, asking him to meet her at the hospital cafeteria. He hesitated, fearing the situation could get even worse, but his concern for Emily spoke louder. When he reached the cafeteria, he found Patricia sitting at a corner table with an open folder in front of her. "Dr. Anderson, thank you for coming," she said, gesturing for him to sit. "I want to talk to you about a possibility that could solve all our problems." "I'm listening," said Michael, trying not to show the desperation he felt. "Last night I did extensive research on single-parent adoption in the United States. Though it's less common than adoption by couples, it's perfectly legal and in many cases beneficial for the child." Michael didn't immediately grasp where she was going with this. "Dr. Anderson, have you ever considered officially adopting Emily?" The question caught him completely off guard. He'd thought of 1,000 ways to resolve the situation, but this had never crossed his mind. "I never thought about it," he admitted honestly. "I mean, I'm single. I work long hours. I don't know if I could." "Dr. Anderson," Patricia interrupted gently, Yesterday, I watched the two of you together. I witnessed something I rarely see in my profession: genuine, immediate paternal love. Emily transforms when she's with you. She smiles, speaks with hope, shows an emotional security I've never seen in any of our previous meetings. Michael felt his heart race. The possibility of truly becoming Emily's father stirred feelings in him he didn't know existed. But what about the hospital, Doctor? Thompson suspended me, and there's the ethical issue of a doctor adopting a patient, he said, trying to be practical despite his emotions. I've already spoken with Dr. Thompson about this. If you decide to move forward with the adoption, Emily's treatment would be permanently transferred to another doctor, eliminating any conflict of interest. As for the suspension, I believe we can work out a solution once he understands your true motivations. Michael fell silent for several minutes, processing what he was hearing. The possibility of having Emily as his daughter filled him with a joy he hadn't felt in years, but it also terrified him. Could he be a good father? Could he give her everything she deserved? And Emily, does she know about this possibility? He asked. Not yet. I wanted to see if it was something you'd seriously consider first. If so, we'd need to follow all legal protocols. There'll be psychological evaluations, home visits, a supervised trial period. The process could take several months. And what if during that process they decide I'm not fit to be a father? Patricia smiled for the first time since they'd met. Dr. Anderson, after 15 years evaluating families, I can assure you, you've shown more paternal instinct in 2 days than many candidates show in months of evaluation. The question isn't whether you're fit, it's whether you're willing to take on this responsibility. In that moment, Michael knew his answer was yes. The idea of having Emily as his daughter not only excited him but seemed to fill a void in his life he hadn't even known was there. Yes, he said firmly, I want to try to adopt Emily. Patricia nodded with satisfaction. Good. Now we need to talk to her. But first, there's something I must tell you about Emily's medical history that might influence your decision. Michael felt a twinge of worry. What is it? Her treatment is working very well. The doctors are optimistic she'll make a full recovery. However, because of the immunosuppressant medication, she'll need special care for the next 2 years. She won't be able to attend regular school initially, will need to avoid crowds, and will require strict medical supervision. That means she'd need someone at home with her most of the time, said Michael, considering the practical implications. Exactly. It would be a significant change in anyone's life. Michael didn't hesitate for even a second. Then I'll adjust my work schedule. I'll switch to part-time or request a transfer to the administrative department. Emily comes first. The determination in his voice convinced Patricia completely that she was making the right decision. When they returned to Emily's room, they found the girl sadly playing with a puzzle a volunteer had brought. Her eyes lit up when she saw Michael, but soon filled with worry. Dr. Michael, you came back, she exclaimed, trying to sit up in bed. I thought you couldn't visit me anymore. Emily, we need to talk about something very important, said Patricia, sitting in a chair beside the bed. Dr. Michael and I had a conversation, and we want to ask you a special question. The girl looked between the two adults with curiosity mixed with apprehension. Emily, Michael began, holding her small hand, how would you feel if I became your real father? Not pretending, but officially through adoption. Emily's eyes widened, and for a moment she was completely speechless. Then tears began to stream down her face, but this time they were tears of joy. Really? Really? She asked, her voice trembling with emotion. Really? Michael confirmed. If you want, and if everything goes well with the paperwork, you'd be my daughter forever. Emily threw herself into his arms, crying and laughing at the same time. I want to so much, she said, hugging him with all the strength her little body could muster. Patricia watched the scene with misty eyes. In 15 years of her career, she had witnessed many family reunifications, but rarely had she seen such an instant and genuine connection. Still, she knew the road ahead would be long and full of challenges. First, they needed to resolve Michael's situation at the hospital. Then there was the entire legal adoption process, which could take months. And all that time, Emily would remain in the hospital, waiting to see if her dream would come true. When they stepped out of the room, Patricia pulled Michael aside for a private conversation. "Dr. Michael, I need to be clear about one thing. The adoption process won't be easy. There will be people questioning whether a single man can properly raise a little girl. There will be bureaucracy, invasive evaluations, and moments when you'll doubt yourself. Are you sure you're prepared for this?" "Patricia, until 3 days ago, I was a lonely man who lived only for work. I had no real happiness in my life. Emily changed that. She gave me a reason to want to be a better person. No matter what it takes, I'll fight for her." Meanwhile, on another floor of the hospital, Dr. Richard was having a difficult conversation with the administrative board about Michael's situation. Some members believed he should be fired immediately, while others argued his intentions had been noble. "What concerns me," said Dr. Sarah Miller, head of the psychology department, "is that if we punish a doctor for showing excessive compassion toward a patient, what message are we sending to our staff?" "The issue isn't compassion, Sarah," argued Dr. William Taylor, head of oncology. "It's protocol violation. If we allow this, where do we draw the line?" "But where do we draw the line on humanity?" Sarah countered. "Doctor, Michael is one of the best pediatricians this hospital has ever had. His success rates are impressive, and more importantly, he has a special connection with sick children. Can we really afford to lose someone like that?" The discussion continued for 2 hours, until Dr. Richard decided he needed to speak personally with some staff members who had worked closely with Michael. His first stop was with Nurse Margaret, the hospital's most senior nurse. "Margaret, I want your honest opinion about Dr. Michael Anderson," he said, finding her at the nursing station. "Dr. Richard, in my 20 years at this hospital, I've worked with many doctors. Some are technically excellent but cold with patients. Others are caring but not as clinically skilled. Dr. Michael is rare because he combines technical excellence with genuine human compassion. But doesn't what happened with Emily concern you? What would concern me is if a doctor saw a sick child begging for paternal affection and simply ignored it. Dr. Michael did what any decent person would do. The fact that he's a doctor doesn't make him less human." Margaret paused, carefully choosing her next words. "Dr. Richard, can I tell you something? Over the last 3 months, I've seen Dr. Michael do things for Emily that went far beyond his medical duties. When she had nightmares and woke up crying, he came to talk to her even after his shift ended. When treatment made her nauseous and she couldn't eat, he brought fruit from home because he knew she loved mangoes. Is that a dedicated doctor or someone who genuinely loves that child?" Dr. Richard fell silent, processing what he was hearing. "Besides," Margaret continued, "if you suspend Dr. Michael, who will take care of the other children who depend on him? Jack, the 6-year-old who only takes his medicine when Dr. Michael explains it to him. Olivia, the 10-year-old who was slipping into depression until Dr. Michael started talking to her about her dreams. Ethan, the 12-year-old who said he wants to be a doctor just like Dr. Michael when he grows up." Every word from Margaret hit Dr. Richard like a revelation. He had focused so much on the administrative and legal aspects of the situation that he'd forgotten the human impact of his decisions. His next conversation was with Dr. William Taylor, who had temporarily taken over Emily's care. "William, how has Emily been since Michael was suspended?" Dr. William sighed deeply. "Richard, clinically she's stable, but emotionally she's a different child. She barely speaks, has no appetite, and asks for Dr. Michael several times a day. Yesterday she asked me if she'd done something wrong to make him stop visiting her." "And what did you say?" "What could I say? That adults sometimes complicate simple situations? That sometimes we punish people for loving too much? Richard, you need to look at this from another angle. Michael didn't harm that child, he saved her, and now we're punishing them both for it." That afternoon, Dr. Richard made a decision that surprised everyone. He called an emergency meeting of the administrative board and made an announcement no one expected. "Colleagues, after careful reflection and conversations with our team, I've concluded that our response to Dr. Michael's situation was excessive. Though he violated protocols, he did so with pure motivations and positive results for the patient. There were murmurs of surprise in the room. Therefore, I am revoking Dr. Michael's suspension, effective immediately. However, he will be transferred to the administrative wing for the next 2 months, where he'll work on protocols to improve emotional support for pediatric patients. I believe his experience can help us create guidelines that allow compassion within appropriate boundaries. Dr. Williams smiled openly, while some other board members looked surprised but not opposed to the decision. When Michael received the call from Dr. Richard, he was at home, trying to research adoption processes online. The news that his suspension had been revoked left him in shock. "Dr. Anderson," Richard said over the phone, "I made a mistake suspending you without fully considering the context of the situation. Your compassion for Emily is exactly the kind of quality we want on our team. I hope you can forgive me for overreacting." "Dr. Richard, Thank you," Michael said, still processing the information. "Does this mean I can go back to caring for Emily?" "Actually, no. If you truly intend to adopt her, it would be more appropriate for another doctor to take over her treatment to avoid conflicts of interest. But you can visit her as a prospective adoptive father, not as her physician." Michael felt a mix of relief and joy. He could see Emily again and his career was secure. Most importantly, the adoption process could move forward without additional complications. When he arrived at the hospital the next morning, he found Emily awake and eager, looking out the window as if waiting for someone. "Em, how are you?" he said, entering the room with a big smile. "Daddy," she cried, reaching her arms out to him. "Nurse Margaret said you could visit me again." Michael hugged her, feeling a happiness he hadn't experienced in years. "Yes, my dear. And I have news about our conversation yesterday." "About the adoption?" she asked, her eyes shining. "Mrs. Wilson will start all the paperwork today. It'll take a few months, but if everything goes well, you'll officially be my daughter." Emily cried with joy, and Michael realized his own tears were falling too. "But Daddy, where will we live?" she asked, always practical despite her young age. "Well, my apartment is too small for the two of us. I'll look for a house with a backyard where you can play when you're better, and I want you to have your own room, just like you've always dreamed." "With pink wallpaper?" she asked hopefully. "With pink wallpaper, a canopy bed, and a bookshelf full of stories for us to read together," Michael promised. That afternoon, Patricia officially began the adoption process. The first step would be a detailed psychological evaluation of Michael, followed by a socioeconomic assessment and home visits. "Dr. Anderson," she explained, "the process usually takes between 6 months and a year. During that time, you'll be able to visit Emily regularly, and when she's discharged from the hospital, she'll stay in a temporary foster home until the adoption is finalized." "Foster home?" Michael asked, concerned. "She can't come live with me right away." "Not until the adoption is official, but there's good news. We can request a supervised visitation period where Emily would spend weekends and holidays with you under the supervision of a social worker. If all goes well, that could lead to temporary custody, allowing her to live with you before the adoption is complete." Michael nodded, understanding each step was necessary to protect Emily and ensure she went to a suitable home. 2 weeks later, Michael had his first psychological evaluation with Dr. Sarah Miller. He was nervous, knowing his and Emily's future depended on this assessment. "Dr. Anderson, I'll ask you some questions about your motivation to adopt Emily," said Sarah, a woman in her 50s with graying hair and kind eyes. "First question, why do you want to adopt a child?" Michael thought carefully before answering. "Until I met Emily, I had never seriously considered fatherhood. After my divorce, I threw myself entirely into my career. But when I saw her courage, the way she faces her illness with hope, how she cares for others even while enduring so much suffering, I realized I wanted to be part of her life. I want to help her grow, achieve her dreams, and be happy." "And why Emily specifically? There are many children in need of adoption." "Because when I'm with her, I feel like my truest self. She awakens in me a protective instinct and a love I never knew I had. It's not just that I want to help her. I can't imagine my life without her." Sarah took several notes, impressed by Michael's sincerity and the depth of his answers. How do you plan to balance your medical career with fatherhood? I've already spoken with Dr. Richard about reducing my hours. I intend to work 4 days a week instead of 6 and avoid overnight shifts. Emily will be my priority. And if she decides when she's older that she wants to find her biological family or learn more about her parents. Michael paused, carefully considering the question. I'll fully support whatever decision she makes. Her biological parents will always be part of her story, and I'd never try to replace that memory. I want to be an addition to her life, not a substitute. The evaluation continued for 2 hours, covering topics like his hopes for the future, his approach to discipline, his concerns about raising a girl, and his financial plans for her education. By the end, Sarah was convinced Michael would be an exceptional father. Dr. Anderson, I'll be direct. I rarely meet adoption candidates as emotionally prepared as you. My recommendation will be entirely favorable. Meanwhile, Emily was undergoing her own evaluation with child psychologist Dr. Rebecca Johnson. Emily, can you tell me how you feel about Dr. Anderson? Asked Rebecca, a lively young woman specializing in childhood trauma. He makes me feel safe, Emily replied, playing with a doll Rebecca had given her. When I'm scared about treatment or can't sleep, he always knows what to say to make me feel better. And how do you feel about the possibility of him becoming your father? Emily's face lit up instantly. It's like a dream coming true. I've always wanted a daddy who really loves me, and Dr. Anderson already does. I can feel it. Do you have any worries about living with him? Emily thought for a moment. Sometimes I'm afraid he'll change his mind, that he'll realize I'm too much trouble or too sick and won't want me anymore. Rebecca took notes, recognizing the abandonment fears common in children who've been through the adoption system. Emily, what do you think makes a real family? I think it's when people love each other even when they're mad, when they take care of each other when they're sick, when they're happy just being together, she answered with wisdom beyond her years. Rebecca smiled, touched by the girl's mature response. And do you think you have that with Dr. Anderson? I'm sure, Emily said without hesitation. He's happy when I get better and worried when I'm sad. Isn't that what a father's love is? After several sessions, Rebecca concluded that Emily was not only ready for adoption, but that her bond with Michael was genuine and healthy. A month into the process, Michael was approved for home visits. Patricia would inspect his apartment to assess the living conditions he could offer Emily. He had spent weeks preparing everything. He bought children's books, educational toys, and even set up a small guest room with child-friendly decor, even though he knew Emily could only officially live with him after the adoption was finalized. Dr. Anderson, I see you've made significant preparations, Patricia remarked as she inspected the apartment. But I have to ask, isn't this apartment a bit small for 2 people? Actually, I'm already looking for a bigger house, Michael explained. I've found a few options in neighborhoods with good schools and recreational areas for kids. I want Emily to have space to play and invite friends over once she's fully recovered. Patricia was impressed by Michael's detailed planning. He had researched schools specializing in children with special medical needs, calculated all the costs of raising a child, and even started looking into extracurricular activities Emily might enjoy when the time was right. One last question, Dr. Anderson. How do you plan to handle the specific challenges of raising a girl? Michael smiled. I've already started researching that. I've read books on female child development, talked to colleagues who have daughters, and even joined a support group for single parents. I know there will be moments when I'll need help, especially when she enters her teens, but I'm committed to learning and growing with her. 3 weeks later, Michael received the news he'd been waiting for. His first supervised visit had been approved. Emily could spend an entire Saturday with him at his apartment. When he told her the news, she was so excited she couldn't sleep the night before. Daddy, what's your house like? She asked, as he helped her get dressed for the special occasion. It's small but cozy. It has a nice view of the city, and I've prepared some surprises for you, he said, barely containing his own excitement. Patricia accompanied them to Michael's apartment, where she would stay to supervise the visit. When Emily walked in and saw the room he'd prepared for her, she burst into happy tears. Is this mine? She asked, gazing at the pink walls, the canopy bed, and the bookshelf full of books. "It will be yours when you can officially live here," Michael said. "Until then, it's waiting for you." They spent the day cooking together, reading stories, doing puzzles, and simply enjoying each other's company. Patricia observed discreetly, taking notes on every interaction. What impressed her most was the natural ease between them. Michael wasn't trying to impress anyone or pretend to be someone he wasn't. He was simply a loving father, spending time with his daughter, even if, officially, she wasn't yet his daughter. "Daddy," Emily said at lunchtime, "when I can live here, will you teach me how to cook?" "Of course. We can start with simple things like cookies and cakes. And when you're older, I'll teach you more complicated dishes." "And will you help me with my homework?" "Every day, if you want. We can turn it into a game, so studying is fun." Patricia watched, struck by how Michael answered each of Emily's questions with patience and genuine enthusiasm. At the end of the day, when it was time to take Emily back to the hospital, she began to cry. "I don't want to leave," she said, hugging Michael. "Why can't I stay here forever?" Michael's heart ached. He didn't want to let her go either, but he knew they had to follow the process. "My dear, we just have to wait a little longer. But I promise there will be many more visits and soon you'll be able to stay here forever." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us tremendously as we're just starting out. Now continuing. 2 weeks after the first visit, Michael received an unexpected call that would change everything. It was from Patricia, but her voice was tense and worried. "Dr. Anderson, I need to speak with you urgently. Can you come to my office this afternoon?" "Of course. Has something happened to Emily?" he asked, immediately concerned. "She's physically fine, but a complication has come up in the adoption process that we need to discuss in person." Michael spent the rest of the day distressed, trying to imagine what could have gone wrong. When he arrived at Patricia's office, he found her with a serious expression and a thick folder on the desk. "Dr. Anderson, I've received information that could significantly complicate the adoption process," she said, gesturing for him to sit. "What kind of information?" "A distant relative of Emily's has come forward contesting the adoption, a great-aunt named Gladys Peterson, who lives in Omaha. She claims she should have been notified about Emily's situation and that she's interested in taking custody." Michael felt as if the ground had vanished beneath his feet. But Emily was an orphan. How did this woman not know about her situation? Apparently, there was a gap in the records. Gladys is the sister of Emily's paternal grandfather, but she was living abroad when her parents passed away. She only learned of the girl's existence when she returned to the United States last week and started searching for relatives. And she wants to adopt Emily? She wants custody. She's a widow, 62 years old, and claims that as a blood relative, she has legal priority over the child. Michael ran his hands over his face, trying to process the information. "Does Emily know?" "Not yet. I wanted to speak with you first. The hearing to decide custody is scheduled for next week. Patricia, Emily barely knew me 2 months ago and we've already formed a deep bond. How can a stranger just show up and take her away?" Legally, relatives take precedence in adoption cases, especially when the child has no established legal ties to others. It's a complicated situation. Michael felt a mix of anger and despair. After everything he and Emily had been through, after all the plans they'd made, a stranger could destroy it all. "Can I meet this woman? Can I talk to her?" "She's arriving in town tomorrow. Maybe we can arrange a meeting, but Dr. Anderson, I need to prepare you. She seems determined to take Emily." That night, Michael couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about how to tell Emily that a great aunt she'd never met might take her away. How do you explain to an 8-year-old that blood ties sometimes carry more legal weight than bonds of love? The next morning, he went to the hospital to talk to Emily before she heard about it from someone else. "Daddy, you look sad," she observed as soon as he entered the room. Michael sat beside the bed and took her small hands in his. "Em, I need to talk to you about something important. A relative of yours has come forward who wants to meet you." "A relative?" she asked, confused. "I have relatives." "A great-aunt named Gladys. She's your grandfather's sister. She was living in another country and only just found out you exist." Emily was silent for a moment, processing the information. And she wants to meet me. Yes, but Em, I have to tell you, she also wants to take care of you. That means our adoption might not happen. Emily's eyes filled with tears instantly. But I don't want to go with her. I want to stay with you. You're my daddy. Michael felt his heart shatter. I know, sweetheart. I want you to stay with me too. But sometimes the laws say blood relatives have priority. But you love me more, Emily cried out, tears streaming down her face. Someone who's never even seen me can't love me like you do. Michael hugged her, trying to comfort her as his own tears fell. No matter what happens, I'll never stop loving you. You'll always be special to me. Promise you'll fight for me? She asked, looking straight into his eyes. I promise I'll do everything in my power, he said, and he had never meant anything more in his life. The next day, Michael met Gladys Peterson in Patricia's office. She was a 62-year-old woman with neatly styled grey hair, conservative clothing, and a posture that radiated determination. Dr. Michael, I've heard about your connection with my great niece, she said, her tone making it clear she disapproved. Mrs. Gladys, Emily and I have formed a very strong bond. She's eager to have a family, and I believe I can give her everything she needs. Doctor, with all due respect, a single man isn't the ideal environment to raise a little girl. She needs a mother figure, traditional family values, the stability only a real family can provide. Michael felt anger rising, but forced himself to stay calm. And what kind of stability can you offer? Emily has never even met you. She's used to Chicago, to the hospital, to the people who care for her here. I can give her real family, Gladys countered. I have nephews her age in Omaha. She'll have cousins to play with, a community that will know her, family traditions to follow. But will she have the unconditional love that already exists between us? Michael asked, cutting straight to the point. Gladys paused, clearly irritated by the question. Love develops over time, Doctor. What matters now is doing what's legally right. Patricia, who had been silently observing the conversation, decided to step in. Mrs. Gladys, would you be willing to meet Emily before we make any decisions? I think it's important she has a chance to express her own feelings. Of course, but I want to make it clear. I didn't come here to negotiate. I came to take my great niece home. The meeting between Gladys and Emily was set for the next day. Michael spent the whole night rehearsing how to support Emily during what would surely be a difficult moment. When Gladys entered the hospital room, Emily instinctively hid behind Michael. Emily, this is your great-aunt Gladys, Patricia said, trying to ease the introduction. Hello, dear, Gladys said with a forced smile. You look just like your father when he was little. I have pictures of him at your age. Emily studied her with curiosity but didn't move from Michael's side. You knew my daddy? She asked shyly. I did. He was my nephew, a very mischievous boy, always playing in his grandparents' backyard. And my mommy. Your mother was a beautiful young woman. They loved each other very much. Michael watched the conversation, seeing Emily relax slightly as she heard about her biological parents. He knew that, no matter what happened, it was important for her to know about her roots. Emily, Gladys continued, I've come to take you to live with me in Omaha. I have a big house with a yard, and your cousins Nathan and Madison can't wait to meet you. But I want to stay here with my daddy Michael, Emily said, clutching his hand. Sweetheart, Doctor, Michael isn't your real father. I'm your real family. Michael saw Emily shrink at those words and felt anger burning inside him. Mrs. Gladys, he said, keeping his voice steady, real family isn't just defined by blood. It's defined by love, care, and commitment. Doctor, you're confusing a sick child, Gladys retorted. She needs to understand her roots, her true identity. My identity, said Emily, with a courage that surprised everyone present, is that I'm the daughter Dr. Michael chose. He loves me just as I am, sick or healthy. And I love him too. Gladys was clearly unsettled by the girl's response. Emily, you're too young to understand these things. When you grow up, you'll be grateful to have been raised by your real family. But he is my real family, Emily shouted, tears welling up. He takes care of me when I'm scared, tells me stories, promises to teach me how to cook. What else does a family do? Gladys shot an irritated glance at Patricia. I see the child has been improperly influenced. That makes it even more urgent to remove her from this situation. Michael felt he was losing Emily, and desperation drove him to take a risky step. Mrs. Peterson, I challenge you to stay here for a week. Watch how I care for Emily. See our routine, witness our bond. If after that you still believe you can give her something better than what we already have, I won't fight your decision. Gladys was taken aback by the offer. And what if I stay and confirm she's better off with me? Then I'll respect your decision and step away from her life, Michael said, even as it felt like tearing his own heart out. Patricia looked between the two adults, realizing Michael had made a gamble, one that might just work. Mrs. Peterson, do you accept the proposal? She asked. Gladys considered for a moment. 1 week, but I want to observe everything. How he handles her medical needs, how he plans to educate her, how he intends to raise her to be a respectable woman. Agreed, Michael said, extending his hand. For the next 3 days, Gladys followed Michael and Emily like a shadow. She watched as he patiently explained each medication to Emily, distracted her during uncomfortable procedures, and read to her until she fell asleep. On the second day, she saw Michael spend 2 hours teaching Emily how to make beaded bracelets, something the girl had seen other kids do and wanted to learn. Why do you waste so much time on these silly things? Gladys asked. Because to her, they're not silly, Michael replied. They're moments of normalcy and joy in the middle of a tough medical journey. They're happy memories she'll carry for the rest of her life. On the third day, Gladys watched Michael comfort Emily after a nightmare. I dreamed I was alone again, Emily sobbed in his arms. You'll never be alone again, Michael promised. No matter what happens, there will always be someone who loves you. But what if Aunt Gladys takes me away? If that happens, it means she believes she can take better care of you. And even if we're apart, my love for you won't fade, not even a little. Gladys stood by the door, watching as Michael put Emily's emotional well-being above his own desires. On the fourth day, something happened that completely changed Gladys's perspective. Emily had an allergic reaction to a new medication and had to be rushed to the emergency room. Michael stayed calm, explained the situation to the medical team, and kept Emily calm throughout the ordeal. How did you know exactly what to do? Gladys asked once the crisis had passed. Because I study every aspect of her condition. I read about every medication, consult specialists, stay updated on treatments. When you love someone, knowledge is a form of protection. And what if she'd had this reaction in Omaha, where I don't know the doctors or her medical history? Michael didn't answer, letting her reach the conclusion herself. On the fifth day, Gladys saw something that touched her deeply. Emily was talking to a younger child who had just arrived at the hospital and was scared of the treatment. You don't have to be afraid, said Emily, holding the child's hand. The doctors here are very good, and my dad Michael always says that being brave doesn't mean not being scared. It means doing what's right, even when you are afraid. Gladys realized that Michael had taught Emily not just to receive love, but to give love to others. On the sixth day, she had a serious conversation with Patricia. I can see that Dr. Michael genuinely loves Emily, Gladys admitted, but I still believe a child needs a traditional family. Mrs. Gladys, in my experience, children need consistent love, emotional stability, and adults who are committed to their well-being. That can come from many different kinds of families. But what if he marries again? What if his new wife doesn't like Emily? And what if that doesn't happen? What if she has a wonderful stepmother? What if... Mrs. Gladys, we can't base present decisions on future possibilities. We can only assess the current reality. Dr. Michael is dedicated, loving, and Emily is clearly happy with him. On the seventh and final day, Gladys asked to speak with Emily alone. Emily, if you had to choose between living with me or with Dr. Michael, what would you choose? Emily didn't hesitate for even a second. Dad Michael. He knows me. He knows when I'm sad, even when I pretend to be happy. He knows I like mangoes, but not apples. He knows I'm afraid of the dark, but that I can sleep when he sings softly. What if I promised you a big house, new toys, cousins to play with? Aunt Gladys, I know you're good, said Emily. with wisdom beyond her 8 years. And I know you want to take care of me because I'm family, but Dad Michael wants me because he loves me. It's different. That afternoon, Gladys requested a meeting with Michael, Patricia, and Emily. "I've spent this week observing you," she began, her voice slightly trembling. "And I need to admit something that's hard for me. I was wrong." Michael held his breath. "Dr. Michael, you've shown a fatherly love I've rarely witnessed. Emily isn't just well cared for physically, she's emotionally secure and happy in a way I couldn't provide." Emily looked between the adults, trying to understand what was happening. "Does this mean—" Michael started. "It means I withdraw my custody claim," said Gladys, tears in her eyes. "But I have one condition." Michael tensed. "I want to stay in Emily's life as her great aunt. I want her to know her family history, to stay connected to her roots, not to replace what you have, but to add to it." Emily got out of bed and hugged Gladys. "Does this mean I can have Dad Michael and you?" she asked. "Yes, sweetheart. It means you'll have even more people who love you." Michael felt such a mix of relief and gratitude he could barely speak. "Mrs. Gladys, that would be wonderful," he said, his voice choked. "Also," Gladys continued, "I want to contribute financially to Emily's education. I have some savings, and I'd like them to be used to give her the best opportunities possible." 2 weeks later, the adoption hearing finally took place. With Gladys publicly supporting the adoption and all technical reports favorable, the judge didn't hesitate to approve the process. "Dr. Michael Anderson," said Judge Robert Brown, "I grant you full custody and adoption of Emily Peterson Anderson. May this family built on love be blessed with much happiness." When the gavel struck, Michael and Emily embraced, crying with joy. Finally, officially, she was his daughter. "Daddy," she said through tears, "can I call you Daddy forever now?" "Forever," he confirmed. The following months brought significant changes for both of them. Michael bought a house in a quiet residential neighborhood with a backyard where Emily could play and a bedroom decorated exactly as she had dreamed. Emily responded wonderfully to treatment and was medically discharged 6 months after the adoption. Though she still needed regular checkups, the doctors were optimistic about her full recovery. Michael reduced his hours at the hospital and began working primarily in administration, developing protocols for emotional support for pediatric patients. His work with Emily had shown him the importance of holistic care in children's medicine. Gladys kept her promise and visited Chicago once a month, always bringing stories about Emily's family and photos of her parents. These visits became special moments where Emily learned about her roots while feeling loved and secure in her new family. "Daddy," Emily said one night as Michael tucked her into bed, "do you think my birth parents would be happy with me now?" Michael thought carefully before answering. "I think they'd be proud to see how you've become a brave, kind, and loving girl. And I think they'd be grateful you found a family who loves you unconditionally. And are you happy with me, Daddy? Emily, you're the best thing that's ever happened to me. I'm the happiest father in the world." A year after the adoption, Michael threw a special birthday party for Emily, her first family celebration. Gladys came from Omaha, bringing her nephews to meet Emily. Nurse Margaret and several hospital staff attended, along with Dr. Richard and other colleagues who had followed their journey. "Dad," Emily whispered, pulling Michael aside during the party, "can I tell you a secret?" "Of course, sweetheart." "Remember when I asked you to pretend to be my daddy for just one day?" "How could I forget?" "I knew it wasn't pretend. I felt in my heart that you already loved me for real, even though you didn't have to. That's why I had the courage to ask." Michael hugged his daughter, realizing she had been wiser than all the adults from the very beginning. "And you were right, as always," he said. That night, after all the guests had left and Emily was asleep, Michael sat in his study to write in the journal he'd started about his journey as a father. "Today, Emily turned 10, he wrote. 2 years ago, I was a lonely man who thought I had everything in life. I didn't know I was empty until she showed me what unconditional love means. She didn't just give me the chance to be a father, she taught me what it means to be human. Every day with her is a gift. Every smile of hers is a victory. Every achievement of hers is my greatest joy." He paused, listening to the soft sounds of Emily sleeping in the next room. "People often ask if I regret risking my career for a child I barely knew. The answer is simple. It was the best decision I ever made. Because I didn't save Emily. She saved me." 3 years after the adoption, Emily was fully healed and thriving in school. She had developed a passion for science and often talked about wanting to be a doctor like her father when she grew up. "Daddy," she said one afternoon as they did homework together, "remember when you said real family is about choice, not blood?" "I do." "So does that mean I chose you and you chose me?" "Exactly." "So we're family? Because we want to be family?" "Yes, my dear. Because we love each other enough to work every day to be better for one another." Emily smiled, pleased with the answer. "Then we're the truest family there is." Michael looked at his daughter, smart, caring, brave, and full of life, and knew she was right. They were indeed the truest family that could exist. 5 years had passed since that day at the hospital when a sick little girl asked a lonely doctor to pretend to be her father for a few hours. What began as an innocent lie to make a child happy on her birthday had turned into the truest love story either of them could have imagined. Michael continued working at the hospital, now as the director of the Pediatric Integrated Care Department, a program he had developed based on his experience with Emily. The program combined medical excellence with emotional support, recognizing that healing a child goes far beyond just treating their physical condition. Emily, now 13, had grown into an extraordinary young woman. Her experiences at the hospital had made her empathetic and mature, but she kept the joy and optimism that had won Michael over from the very first day. She often returned to the hospital as a volunteer, helping to distract younger children during treatments. "You know," she said to Michael one evening, as they prepared dinner together, "sometimes I wonder if our story would have been different if you had said no when I asked you to pretend to be my dad." "And what's your conclusion?" Michael asked, curious. "I think we would have found a way to be family anyway. Because some things are just meant to happen." Michael smiled, remembering how his daughter always managed to see the magic in ordinary situations. "Maybe you're right," he said. "Maybe some families are made by destiny and just need to recognize each other." "Dad?" "Yes? Thank you for pretending to be my dad that day, even though I know you were never really pretending." Michael stopped what he was doing and hugged his daughter, feeling once again the immense gratitude for having her in his life. "Thank you for giving me the chance to discover what it's like to be a real father," he said. That night, like every night for the past 5 years, Michael went to Emily's room to say goodnight before she slept. It was a tradition they had kept since the first day she came to live with him. "Good night, my dear," he said, kissing her forehead. "Good night, Dad. I love you." "I love you too. I'll always love you." As he left the room, Michael reflected on how a simple lie told to make a child happy had become the most important truth of his life. He had pretended to be Emily's father for a few hours, but he had discovered that, in every way that mattered, he had always been meant to be her dad. And she, a brave little girl who had lost so much in life, had taught him that sometimes the most perfect families are the ones we choose to build with love, determination, and the courage to believe that everyone deserves to be loved unconditionally. The end. What a touching story, isn't it? Now tell us what you thought of this narrative and where you're watching from. If you have something special to share with us, leave a sincere comment below. Do you believe Michael made the right decision by agreeing to pretend to be Emily's father? We'd love to hear your opinion. Thank you so much for joining us. Don't forget to like the video and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other heartfelt stories.